Thanks very much for inviting me to say a few words, and congratulations, Uilleann, World Uilleann Piping Day, a very important day in the celebration of part of our Irish musical culture in this town, where of course Uilleann was founded, which has been a centre of Irish traditional music for a very, very long time indeed. And the piping tradition, the Uilleann piping tradition, goes back at least 2 centuries, based on earlier piping traditions in this land. And here in the Mullingar area in Westmeath, it's some very notable piping figures. Going back to the 18th century to the father and son team of John and Timothy Keena, who were among the greatest pipe makers as well as players of their age, famous across the country. And this year, in fact last month, was the 150th anniversary of the birth of one of the greatest Uilleann pipers and pipe makers of the 20th century, a man who was described as being the prince of pipers, Richard Lewis Melia, sometimes referred to as Dick Melia or Richard O'Mealy. And Richard was born at Tristana near Balnacarrigy, not very far out the road from us here, on the 22nd of October 1873, and he was born into a family of pipers. His father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, going back into the early 18th century. The Mealys were neighbours of the Keena family, and Richard's father possessed a set of pipes that had been made by Timothy Keena. And Richard showed an interest in the musical instrument from a very early age, and there's the story of him at the age of about 4 or 5, hiding out in a barn in the family house, and his father finding him there with the pipes on him and saying, keep them on. And he was educated at Wilson's Hospital School, and then he went to work as a shop apprentice in Ballymahon. Much of his working life away from the music was spent in the drapery trade, in Cork, in Dublin, and then in Belfast, where he spent much of his adult life. And his interest in piping was there from very early on, from his childhood, and then in his early adulthood, when he was in his early 20s. He was a founding member of the Cork Piping Club. He was a founding member or early member of the Dublin Piping Club. He was a competitor at the very first Feis Ceoil in Dublin in 1897, where he came third in his section. And he went on to win first prize at the Oireachtas in 1902 and 1903 for his pipe making. And when he moved up to Ulster, up to Belfast, he became involved with the Irish music and cultural tradition in the north. He was a member of the founding committee of what became known as the Feis Glen, the Feis of the Glens, first held in 1904, and he became a close friend of many of the people involved in the cultural movement in Ireland, and particularly in Ulster, people like Francis Joseph Bigger, Alice Milligan and her sister Charlotte Milligan Fox, and Roger Casement. Casement actually presented him with a walking cane. He also was a friend of Douglas Hyde, the founder, of course, of the Gaelic League and Ireland's first president some years later. And he was working out of Arnott's store in Belfast, but he was his music. He played the pipes, he made pipes, he encouraged the careers of many of the next generation of pipers and played with them. And in the 1920s, he became one of the first Irish traditional musicians to play on the BBC, on BBC Radio. He also broadcast on the 2RN service, which would develop into Radio Éireann, and was again one of the first traditional musicians to be heard on 2RN. He adjudicated at numerous feisina around the country, and he was also an adjudicator in the musical sections of the Taunton Games when they were held in Dublin in 1924, the attempt to revive the ancient Irish sports that we read about in the Irish tales and mythologies. And he was a frequent visitor back to his native Westmeath. He attended one of the Feshna held at the Hill of Uilleann before the First World War. And from 1927 he was a regular appearer at the Tristana Fesh, the Tristana Sports, or Aeronach, the Aeronach of the Midlands, one of the great traditional musical events held in the Midlands throughout the early 20th century. He played with Leo Rowsome, the next generation of pipers. He was much admired by Willie Reynolds, who particularly liked his staccato style of playing. He was very generous to younger musicians. He was generous in the making of instruments for players, including some of the first women Uilleann pipers of the modern age, like Anna Nichol up in County Antrim. He died in March 1947, and he's buried at Knockbreda Cemetery in Belfast. And he was honoured this summer here in Mullingar during the Fleadh Cheoil presentation to some of his relatives. And he was, by any standard, one of the greatest traditional musicians that Ireland has ever produced, and one of the greatest Uilleann pipers that this country has produced. And he was from around here. He would, sort of from Tristana, may very well have been sort of on the streets of this town. I don't know whether he would ever have been in this bar, which goes back to nearly back to the time of Timothy Cana and the other pipers. And I said that generation of pipers, many of them who played here too in this town at the first Fleadh and at the earlier Feshna that were held in the town and in the countryside around us. I think of people like Leo Rowsome, Paddy Maloney, who first played here with the Dublin Pipers Club as a boy of 13 in May 1951, and Finbar Fury and others of his family who played here at the 63 Fleadh Cheoil. So today, on World Pipers Day, here we honour the memory of all the great Uilleann pipers down the centuries who have come before us, and we particularly honour in this, the anniversary year of his birth, the man who was described as the Prince of Pipers and was one of the greatest musicians in any tradition that this county has ever produced. Hear me, Michael.
We're very lucky to have you. And thanks for coming every year, and you're just a wealth of knowledge, and you're so generous with your time, no matter what's going on in the town. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.